7 days after our wedding, I was still unpacking the last of my boxes, still calling him my husband like it was new, like it meant something, when his mother walked into our living room uninvited. She had a notary with her, a man in a navy suit holding a clipboard. And she said, without blinking, "You'll be signing those apartments over to my son now." What apartments? The 3 I inherited from my grandmother, the ones I never told anyone about. And that silence, that one secret, it saved me. Keep watching, because the next 5 minutes of this story might just make you rethink everything you believe about marriage, family, and who you can really trust. My name's Sarah Thompson. I'm 29, and this is the story I never thought I'd have to tell. When I married Ethan Carter, I really believed I was walking into something lasting. Not perfect, nothing ever is, but stable, sweet, and maybe even a little magical. You know that feeling? When your heart softens at the sound of someone's laugh? When you believe that, just maybe, you've found your person? That was me, that was us. Our wedding was simple, lovely, just close friends and family, twinkle lights, the smell of late spring in the air, everyone was smiling, everyone except one person, but I'll get to that later. Ethan was kind, thoughtful, and had a calm way about him that felt like home. I never told him about the 3 apartments my grandmother left me after she passed. Not because I was hiding something or planning an escape route, nothing like that. I just knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew not to say a word. I thought maybe it was fear, or maybe I was just being cautious. But that small decision, that quiet little secret I kept tucked in the back of my mind, it saved me. Grandma Margaret, or Gran as I always called her, was the sharpest woman I ever knew. She raised me after my parents' divorce, and she always said, "Don't hand your heart or your keys to someone who hasn't shown they can hold either." At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now, those words ring in my ears like a warning I didn't know I needed. She passed away 2 years before the wedding, and in her will, she left me 3 fully paid-off apartments downtown. Not flashy, not Instagram luxury, but clean, desirable, each one worth 7 figures in this market. And I never breathed a word to Ethan, not during the engagement, not when we signed the marriage license, not on the honeymoon. It wasn't about playing games. It was about listening to that little voice that said, "Wait, just wait." And then, exactly 1 week after we returned from our honeymoon, his mother showed up. No text, no call, just a knock at the door on a cloudy Thursday afternoon. She brought a man with her, older, stern-looking, carrying a leather case and papers in hand, a notary. I stood there, barefoot, holding a mug of lukewarm tea. Ethan looked nervous. His mom didn't even try to make small talk. She just said, "We're here about the apartments. It's time to put them in Ethan's name." I felt my stomach turn before I even opened my mouth. So if you've ever had to keep something safe from people who felt way too comfortable taking it, I think you'll want to stick around. This story gets messier, sharper, and yes, in the end, a little bit sweeter. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever protected something precious, something only you understood the value of, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. My grandma Margaret was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and quiet it with just her presence. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it landed. Born in 1935, she had that quiet fire in her, the kind that comes from living through hard things and not letting them break you. She was raised in a time when women were told to stay quiet about money, to let their husbands take care of things, but that wasn't her way. After my grandfather died suddenly in 1963, just a heart attack, out of nowhere, she didn't fold, she didn't lean on family or go looking for a new man. Instead, she put on a pair of block heels, walked into town, and got herself a job as a secretary at a real estate firm. No handouts, no pity. She said it was the loneliest year of her life, but also the one that changed everything. That job didn't pay much, but she watched, she listened, she paid attention to conversations in the break room, took mental notes during meetings, and slowly started asking questions. And in the quiet corners of that dusty office, she learned. By the early 1970s, when the market took a nosedive and most people were selling, Grandma Margaret started buying. Not in the fancy areas, not where people looked, but in the corners of the city people avoided. Old buildings with cracked windows and sagging porches, places with potential no one else could see. She bought her first apartment building in a run-down part of town. Everyone thought she was crazy. Even the bank guy tried to talk her out of it. But she trusted her gut, and she was right. That neighborhood would go on to boom a decade later. And she didn't stop. She kept buying low, fixing things up, renting them out. Over time, that quiet woman with her hair always pinned back built what she called a safety net stitched with patience. I didn't even know the full scope of it while she was alive. I just knew she was smart, sharp, and always seemed to have this quiet power about her. When I was little, I'd sleep at her place on weekends. She made the best hot cocoa, always with a dash of cinnamon, and we'd sit on her tiny balcony looking over the neighborhood. She'd point to rooftops and tell me stories about people she used to help, places she took a chance on. But her advice was always the same. Sarah, never let anyone control your financial security. Not a friend, not a boss, not even someone you love, especially someone you love. I didn't understand it back then. It sounded a little cold, if I'm being honest. But as I got older, and after a few hard lessons with exes who seemed far more interested in my savings than in me, I started to get it. Money changed people. Or maybe it revealed them. Either way, I learned to protect mine. Then came the cancer, 2 years ago. I remember the moment she told me. We were sitting on the edge of her bed. The light from the hallway cast shadows on her face, and her voice didn't shake. She said, "Stage 4. We're not beating it, honey." I moved in with her that same week, left my apartment, took a leave from work, and stayed in the guest room. I cooked her meals, drove her to appointments, held her hand through the worst of it. But in between the pain and the pills and the slow drifting of days, we talked. Really talked. She told me stories I'd never heard before. And one evening, the sun just beginning to set, painting her white curtains gold, she said something I'll never forget. "I've built something big, Sarah. It's yours soon. But be smart with it. Don't let anyone talk you out of your instincts." I thought she meant a few savings bonds, maybe her jewelry box. I had no idea. When she passed away, I was devastated, but also deeply at peace. She went the way she lived, on her terms, with grace. A week later, her lawyer called me in to read the will. And that's when everything shifted. Margaret Hayes had left me 3 fully paid-off properties. One was a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, sleek, modern, and currently rented by a pair of young professionals for $3,200.00 a month. Another was a waterfront condo near the lake, quiet and airy, worth $1,200,000.00, and bringing in $3,800.00 a month from long-term tenants. The third? That was her home. A cozy 1-bedroom in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Now mine. I became a landlord overnight. Me. Sarah Thompson. I went from being someone with a regular job and a 1-bedroom apartment to someone with assets people would kill for. And the scariest part? No one knew. Not even Ethan. Not because I didn't trust him, but because something in me, something I didn't even fully understand at the time, told me to stay quiet. And as I'd soon learn, thank God I did. I never said a word about the inheritance. Not the full truth, not even close. I told Ethan that I got Grandma's apartment when she passed, and that was technically true. But I never mentioned the other 2. I kept those tucked away, just like Margaret told me to, not because I didn't trust him, or maybe, deep down, because I didn't. I'd been burned before. One ex took thousands from my savings account under the sweet little lie that we were building a future together. Another lived rent-free while I footed every bill, always promising he'd pay me back when his startup took off. It never did. And the thing was, every time I brought up money, their smiles changed. Their tone changed. Love turned into leverage. So by the time I met Ethan, I had already learned, when it comes to love and money, honesty doesn't always mean safety. Ethan felt different. He had this clean, effortless charm about him. He was a marketing exec at his family's firm, drove a modest car, laughed at my jokes, held the door open without making a show of it. We met at a friend's game night, ended up on the same trivia team, and by the end of the night, I already knew I wanted to see him again. Our second date was tacos and old war documentaries. I know, random combo, but somehow it worked. He was smart, attentive, quick to listen. We fell fast. By the 3rd month, I was picturing what our life could look like. 6 months in, we were picking out wedding venues. But through it all, I kept that one part of my life separate. I opened a private account under my name, had the rent from both properties deposited straight into it, and let the money sit there, untouched, growing. Every once in a while, I'd lie in bed at night staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was wrong for hiding it. Was it a betrayal? Was I already setting us up for failure by not being fully open? But then, I'd hear Margaret's voice in my head, steady, clear. Financial independence isn't negotiable, Sarah, especially when love is involved. I held on to that like it was armor. Ethan proposed on New Year's Eve. There was snow in the park where we had our first kiss, and he dropped to one knee while fireworks cracked in the distance. It was everything romantic comedies promise. I said yes with tears in my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. But even that night, sipping champagne in Margaret's old apartment, now mine, I didn't tell him the full story. Something in my gut just said, not yet. Meeting Ethan's parents was the first red flag I ignored. His mom, Vivian, was all pearls and power plays. She welcomed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The moment I stepped into their home, a massive, cold mansion with marble floors and silent halls, I felt like I was being sized up. Her eyes went straight to my shoes, then my coat, then my posture. Over dinner, she asked about my work in publishing with a tone so sweet, it hurt my teeth. "So, Sarah, you're in books? And living in your grandma's old apartment? That's quaint." Every word was a compliment with a hook inside, and her questions about my finances, way too specific to be casual. I gave vague answers and left feeling like I'd just sat through an interview, not a family dinner. But it told me everything I needed to know. Vivian wasn't just rich, she was strategic. Wedding planning became a chess match. Vivian insisted on St. Mark's Cathedral, a towering Gothic thing with stained glass windows and a rental fee that made me dizzy. I suggested a cozy library venue, something quiet and personal. She laughed and said, "Carter's marry at St. Mark's. We'll take care of the cost, of course." I didn't push back, but I did insist on a modest reception hall afterward, blaming it on family memories so she couldn't argue. The wedding was beautiful, but tense. Vivian's eyes narrowed at my off-white dress, at our jazz band instead of the expected quartet, at every decision that didn't reflect her taste. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I married Ethan, not his mother. After the wedding, Ethan and I agreed to keep separate bank accounts, with one shared for bills and groceries. He said his parents did the same, which made me feel better, until I started wondering who really made that choice in their house, Vivian or William. I wasn't so sure. Married life moved fast. We honeymooned in Greece, came home with sunburns and too many souvenirs, and moved into what was now our apartment. Ethan sold his loft and used part of the money to help upgrade our kitchen. It was during one of those long design talks that he said something that chilled me more than I expected. "Eventually," he said, holding a cabinet sample, "we'll need a bigger place. For when the kids come. Family money should grow with each generation like my parents did." I smiled, but inside a warning bell rang. That sounded a little too much like Vivian, and I couldn't tell if he meant it innocently or if he was trying to plant a seed. Either way, I was so glad I'd kept my secret. Vivian didn't fade into the background after the wedding. If anything, she doubled down. Every Sunday, she'd stop by unannounced with some expensive gift and a loaded comment. Italian dish towels that were better than yours. A new throw pillow that would brighten this drab little place. And always some variation of, "How's work? Any new money coming in? Have you two started planning long-term investments?" I wanted to scream. But Ethan would just roll his eyes and say, "Mom's just old school. Don't let it get to you." But I knew better. I learned that Vivian had made William sign a prenup before they got married, locking down every cent of her inheritance. She did the same to Ethan's sister Emily before she walked down the aisle. It was clear to me then, Vivian didn't see marriage as a partnership. She saw it as a contract, a risk to be managed, a negotiation to win, and I had just become her next project. The moment everything cracked wide open came exactly 1 week after we got back from our honeymoon. Ethan was out of town on a business trip in Chicago, and I was home alone, folding laundry with the windows open, when I heard the buzzer. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I checked the screen, I saw Vivian. And not just her, there was a man with her. He looked formal, stiff, carrying a briefcase and a clipboard. Something inside me tightened. I buzzed him up, and before I could even greet her, she swept into the apartment like she owned it. "Sarah, darling," she said in that syrupy voice of hers. "This won't take long. It's about family security." I didn't even get a chance to offer her tea. She walked straight to the couch, the man trailing behind like a silent shadow. "This is Mr. Daniels," she said, motioning to him. "He's here to help with the paperwork." Then she opened the briefcase, laid out a stack of documents, and said plainly, "It's time to transfer the properties into the Carter Family Trust," just like that, like she was talking about groceries or dry cleaning. My pulse started racing. "Excuse me?" I asked, though I knew what she was doing. "We'll make sure it's all protected under the family umbrella," she continued, as if she was doing me a favor. "Ethan and I, and of course William, will help manage everything. You're young, and this kind of responsibility can be overwhelming." She said it with a smile, but it landed like a slap. I stood still for a second, trying to stay calm. "You investigated me," I said quietly. "You went through Margaret's estate." Vivian didn't blink. "Nothing's private when it concerns family," she said. "Your grandma left you 3 properties, didn't she? Quite a haul for a secretary." That line about Margaret made something snap in me. That sneer, that disrespect for the woman who raised me, who built a legacy from nothing just because she didn't come from money, it made my blood boil. But I kept my voice steady. "My inheritance is private," I said, locking eyes with her. "And I'm not signing anything." She sighed, annoyed, like I was being dramatic. Just then my phone rang. It was Ethan. I didn't even say hello. I put it on speaker and said, "Your mom's here with a notary. She's trying to take my properties." Silence, then Ethan's voice, low and stunned. "What properties?" That hit harder than anything. I took a breath and told him everything. 3 apartments, all in a trust, millions in value. "I didn't tell you," I said, "because I was scared this would happen." Vivian jumped in, saying it was just about protecting the family, but Ethan cut her off. "Mom, don't do anything until I get back," he said. Then he hung up. Vivian was fuming but said nothing. They packed up their documents and left. No apology, no goodbye. That night I called my lawyer, Tom Harris, and we locked everything down tight. Multi-factor authentication, legal alerts, new account verifications. Nobody was getting near my assets without going through a wall of fire. When Ethan got home 2 days later, we fought. Hard. He felt blindsided. I felt ambushed. I accused him of being complicit, of standing by while his mother bulldozed into my life. He swore he had no idea, and looking in his eyes, I believed him. But the damage was already done. After that, things spiraled. Vivian sent Ethan's sister, Emily, to talk sense into me. She showed up with a fruit basket and a thinly veiled threat, saying things like, "The family trust helps everyone grow. You're part of us now. Don't fight the system." Then William called Ethan for lunch, which ended with a warning that if Ethan didn't show more loyalty, he'd be cut out of client meetings. Their firm started reducing his responsibilities. He came home later and later smelling like whiskey and frustration. One night, sitting in the dark on the couch, Ethan opened up. "Mom did this to my Aunt Laura," he said. "She refused to sign over her inheritance, and Mom made sure Uncle Pete lost every business connection. They had to leave the state." I was speechless. "And you're okay with that?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I'm done going along with it." That's when we started couples therapy. For the first time, Ethan admitted he didn't want to be controlled by his parents anymore. He said he married me for me, not my assets. I showed him the property files, opened the books, and explained everything. How I grew up watching men treat my independence like a threat. He got it. The next day, he called his mother and invited her over. When she walked in, I was already sitting at the dining table, documents spread out. Ethan sat beside me. United. Stronger. "Mom," he said, "Sarah's inheritance stays hers. This is not up for negotiation. And we need boundaries." At first, Vivian tried to smile it away, but then something shifted. She snapped. Not with anger, but desperation. "William's been gambling," she blurted out. "The business is down $700,000. We need collateral. The banks won't help. If we lose the firm, we lose everything." Ethan stood up, stunned. "You could have just asked," he said. "Why the games?" Vivian broke. She started crying. Real tears, not the kind you cry to get your way. She admitted she was scared. Scared of losing her name, her place, her legacy. And to my shock, she apologized. She said she never expected me to be the one holding the cards, and she didn't know how to handle that. Ethan looked at me. I looked at her, and I said, "We'll help, but on one condition." We offered 1 apartment as collateral. but only if William got treatment and they hired a professional management team. She agreed. In that moment, something inside me shifted too. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was protecting my money from my marriage. I was protecting us from the people who thought they could buy control with bloodlines and secrets. The months that followed were quieter, but not without change. William agreed to rehab and stuck with "it's something" no one in the family believed would actually happen. Vivian began seeing a therapist, and slowly, her edges softened. The calls got gentler. The unannounced visits stopped. And Ethan? He made the hardest decision of his life. He left the Carter family business, walked away from everything he'd known, and took a new job at Horizon Marketing, a smaller firm but one where he could finally breathe. And he flourished. I got promoted at my publishing house, and with Ethan's encouragement, I bought a fourth property, not because I needed it, but because I could, because I trusted myself to keep growing. And now, I had someone by my side who truly supported me. 3 months later, Vivian surprised us. She showed up, not with a lawyer, not with conditions, but with a manila envelope. Inside was the deed to her grandmother's beach cottage. "It's not part of the family trust," she said. "It's just for you two." Her eyes were wet and she added, "My mother taught me money was about control. I was wrong. You proved there's another way." I didn't say anything at first, just nodded. But in that moment I felt something loosen in my chest. Not full forgiveness, but a beginning. On our second anniversary, Ethan and I sat on the porch of that cottage, feet propped up, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun disappear into the waves. "Your grandma Margaret would be proud," Ethan said, his voice soft. I looked over at him, thinking about everything we had fought through. "She wanted me to stand strong," I said, "but also love fully." I think we finally understood what that meant. The hardest lessons often come with the heaviest cost, but if you're lucky, you learn. We learn that financial independence doesn't mean hiding. It means mutual respect. We learn that protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you smart. And we learned that even the most toxic patterns can be broken with time, patience, and boundaries that hold firm. A few weeks later, I told Ethan I was pregnant. We held each other, both crying, both laughing, and right away, we started planning. Not just baby names or nursery colors, but how to teach our child what Margaret taught me, that real security comes from knowledge and independence. We set up a small trust, not to control them, but to give them options. And we started a nonprofit in Margaret's name, focused on helping young women learn about money, saving, investing, negotiating. We wanted her story to mean something beyond just us. Looking back, that day Vivian came to our door with a notary felt like a crisis, but it turned out to be a turning point. That confrontation forced us to face hard truths, set new boundaries, and grow, not just as individuals, but as partners. My inheritance wasn't just 3 apartments. It was the courage to speak up, the strength to hold my line, and the wisdom to use what I was given in a way that builds, not controls. If you've ever had to guard something of yours, your money, your peace, your worth, from people who felt entitled to it, you know exactly what I mean. Share your story in the comments, and if you want more real stories about navigating messy families and building real independence, subscribe. Sometimes the real inheritance isn't money. It's the wisdom to know what matters and the guts to protect it. So if you've ever had to keep something safe, your peace, your money, your independence, from people who felt entitled to it, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. Let's remind each other we're not alone in this. And if this story meant something to you, go ahead and hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. Real stories, honest lessons, and reminders that protecting what matters isn't selfish. It's strong, because at the end of the day, the true inheritance isn't just money. It's knowing your worth, standing your ground, and choosing love without losing yourself.